Welcome to an exciting edition of Founding Philly, where we assemble local startup founders at the Fiddler Club to discuss their entrepreneurship journeys. Gain deep insights and inspiration from this roundtable discussion with Helena Jaramillo from PamPam, Tito Obaisi from Comcast Lift Labs, and Lilly Chen from Fish Technologies. Well, welcome to the Founding Philly Roundtable series. Appreciate you all being part of it. The Roundtable series is a little bit different than what we've done in the past for Founding Philly. The real goal of what we're trying to do here is bring together founders, builders, and ecosystem partners to have a really open, candid conversation. Really just about the Philly startup scene, what it's like building in Philly, and kind of hear those real stories to share with the local ecosystem. With JP Morgan's guidance, your startup can go from growing pains to growing without limits. With tech that powers your growth and bankers across the globe to help you disrupt every market, you can go from seed to IPO and beyond. JP Morgan, let's build your future together. So to kind of jump in, I want to do some quick intros. So Lilly, mind just going first?
My name is Lilly. I'm the CEO and founder of Fish Technologies. Fish Technologies is a venture-backed company that builds software for local government.
I'm Tito. I'm with Comcast, the Lift Labs at Comcast, and our team is really tries to be the link between Comcast, NBC Universal, and the startup ecosystem. So we keep an eye on who is doing really innovative things in the ecosystem, and we keep an eye on what people are working on internally, and we try to bridge that gap.
Awesome.
I'm Helena. I'm the CEO and co-founder of PamPam. We're a custom map maker. Think like Mapbox without developers. So brands, organizations use our maps for their needs.
Awesome. And so when we think about the startup ecosystem, everyone has their own journey of kind of getting into it or falling into it. Some people are just startup people for life, right? And some others aren't. So would love to hear just a little bit more about kind of your backgrounds. Obviously, each one of you kind of have your own unique journeys of how you got here, especially to Philly. So Helena, why don't you go first to share a bit more about PamPam and what kind of led you to PamPam and here in Philly?
Yeah, so I'm a software designer by trade. So I've been like a software designer or product designer for 12 years at companies like Google, Khan Academy, Coda, Figma, and mostly, especially for the past few years, I've been working on like tools for creators, for makers. And so PamPam started as a side project with me and my co-founder. He had worked on Google Maps and maps for Facebook. And so we wanted to create a tool to make maps that felt like modern, creative, flexible, like the other tools that we had built. And so it started off as a side project while we both still had our full-time jobs. And then once it started picking up some traction, I had always kind of wanted to do my own thing. And there wasn't really a moment that was like, oh, it's so obvious to quit my job now. But it was more of like a leap of faith kind of moment to quit my job and go for it full time. So yeah, side project turned into a full-time thing. Yeah.
Love that. No, I think I remember when we first met, I think it was a JP Morgan event or something. And we were talking about it. And I was so excited about the whole idea because previously in my experience, I worked with kind of like the build, create, embed experience. And I thought that was such a really cool kind of way to go to market. What is it, do you think, about maps that has you so excited about it, though?
I think maps feel like so visual, but also so actionable compared to so many mediums. It really is about like going out to a place, and it provides so much more context than a lot of other formats. So that's like one thing that's really exciting. And the other part of it is that it does, especially the way that we're building our maps, it really does create a lot of like local context and kind of like community as well. And so some of the ways that we're most excited about people using our maps are through that lens. But of course, the other part of maps is that they're like so universal. And so we see so many different use cases for it, which is really exciting to build such a flexible tool that can allow so many different use cases.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting. All right, Tito, so you have a unique kind of fit in the startup ecosystem. You work with a lot of founders being part of Lift Labs and Comcast. Mind sharing more about how you got into that?
Yeah, it's a funny journey, as most things tend to be. And my background is in startups, so I've did a lot of growth roles and strategy roles with startups across CPG and food service and some social entrepreneurship ventures, a couple Philly-based startups actually as well. And then I went back to school, did my master's during COVID, and I was thinking about what to do next, and I realized I wanted to be on the other side of the equation, on the funding side, but I wasn't sure I wanted to go straight into venture. And Lift Labs came along, and it's such a unique value proposition, which around the idea we have a large corporate, a Fortune 30 company, that's trying to be innovative. So you have that scale of a large company, but we have this really small, scrappy startup-like group internally. We're not that big of a team, but we punch above our weight. And so it was that combination of being able to be on the other side of the equation, supporting startups, supporting founders that are aligned with Comcast strategic imperatives, while also being able having the scale to make that impact. That was pretty appealing.
What do you see Lift Labs' role in the ecosystem? I think we'll get to it, but I think what's an interesting piece of this is what you said, right? Like the Fortune 30 company being here in Philly. Philly is this growing ecosystem. A lot of companies or cities have their kind of flagship companies, but you have a Comcast in the city that's kind of pushing this like innovation kind of like thing with this accelerator and all of that. How would you position Comcast's role, or what do you think that role really is?
It's a good point. Yeah, like it's the Comcast as Philly's one of Philly's leading companies, does have ability to make an impact. And I think the great thing about what our team does is that there's a lot of mutual benefits to what we do. Comcast is a large company, and we want to be innovative. Right. Innovation usually is in the startup ecosystem, and so to be innovative and to be pushing that next boundary, we need to work with the best and brightest startups. And so being able to find startups that align strategically with what we're trying to do as a company, where we're trying to go, what are the challenges of today, but the challenges of tomorrow as well, and be like in ahead of that, right? And so being able to work with companies that align with that strategic long-term vision is a big part of what we do. We do that year round, but we have these two yearly programs where we have supercharged, we call them accelerators, but they're really focused on driving partnerships between a cohort of companies. So we have a cohort going on right now, actually as of last week, with large companies, small startups, large startups, small startups, collaborating with leadership across Comcast from C-suite down to business level, and end users, being able to collaborate and figure out what that next level of collaboration and partnership looks like with the ecosystem. So in terms of being able to figure out what that trajectory as a local ecosystem looks like, we think that there is room for what benefits, Comcast as a company can benefit companies, small startups as well. Right. Being able to say you have Comcast on your logo page is a great thing to be able to say.
Absolutely. Lilly?
To become a startup founder was never on the roadmap, as the product managers like to say. It was not on the roadmap. It was definitely an accident. It was driven out of oh my God, I'm never going to make it here in big tech. I need to find something else to do.
So you mentioned machine learning. Everyone talks about AI today. A lot of the conversations around the accelerator programs around AI. I know, Helena, you also kind of released a few new AI products from your company. Again, machine learning experience that you have. So I want to just kind of talk about adopting AI in early stage startups, and maybe not just early stage startups. It could be really any company that's just kind of navigating that space right now. I think, and I make it say a year or two ago, it was more of a fad, and people kind of just like throwing the word AI on things. And now you're starting to see real use cases come to life in real ways that AI is being used. So I guess to level set, I'm curious just to get everyone's thoughts, perspective on the whole AI wave, we can call it.
To me, it's a fundamental secular shift, right? It's similar to the internet or mobile. Like it's on that level, if not more pronounced. And I think when it comes to our perspective as a team, we get to see across a lot of trends and how they're affecting startups on the ground. And it's fascinating. You'll see more and more that there are a lot of startups growing faster, smaller than like in any time in recent history. Like you see companies that are 20, 30 people hitting $100 million in revenue, recurring revenue, like in a year to 2 years. Like these are numbers that are just unheard of, right? And so a big part of that, when you dig into it and you talk to a lot of these companies, is they are leveraging AI internally to supercharge themselves individually as teams. And they're seen as a force multiplier, and it's becoming increasingly more that you're seeing people, startups and leaders of startups, seeing AI and their teams less about producing output and more about being intelligence allocators. How do I, as an individual on a team, leverage this massive amount of computing power and LLMs and AI to allocate tasks under my purview and supercharge them, right? And so I can be directed to, or have the freedom to think about the big picture and look long-term and strategically. And so you're seeing more and more companies, even companies that we had brought into our cohort, who are servicing the Fortune 500 with a team of 12, 15. In our cohort, a company called Synthetic Users is one of those companies. And so I think and then the thing with that, it's an innovation that's just unevenly distributed. So there are people who are really jumping onto this train, and some others who are, older companies and people who are just not catching on to it. And so you're seeing these outsized effects in the short to medium term, but it'll become pretty much table stakes, probably in the very, very near future.
And I'm curious, I want to get both of your thoughts, but I think to touch on your point that you're saying is like, and we were talking about this on the call, is like you could introduce a new AI feature, but you can also use AI internally to help you kind of make your operations more efficient, to scale kind of what you're getting at. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, what are you seeing, just some use cases even, of how users are able to make, or how teams maybe are even able to have 12 people on them, but kind of power like a full-blown company?
I mean, the hottest one obviously is coding, the software development lifecycle. Company we brought into our cohort, Codium, but as of the past couple of days, they've been changing that name to Windsurf. That's
breaking news.
That is breaking news, yeah. And so they are AI-powered coding solution with an agentic aspect to it as well, where there's some automation as well. And it feels like that there's something called I think it's the Jevons paradox, where like something to the effect, I'm going to butcher it, but something to the effect of like there's the increase in the supply of something just increases the demand for it, and so there's just always going to be a demand for software, and so if you can produce more software, there's going to be a demand for more software, and so being able to just supercharge that development and for the 10x engineer is something that coding AI solutions are enabling in ways that I don't think we've seen in recent, and coders and developers are always at the forefront of a lot of these technological changes. So they're trying these new tools and getting these new tools built up like that. Yeah. And so Codium Windsurf is one of those tools that we think is part of that secular trend around coding being a use case that is seeing outsized impact, I would say, today.
Lilly, I'm curious to get your thoughts, because I think your perspective on AI, given your background, but then also building software for governments, it's almost like, is it a huge jump to go from just like better software to AI, or is AI part of the conversation?
Ooh, better software to AI. Okay.
Well, I guess first, what's your thoughts on everything that's happening with AI?
So I actually want to jump off of what Tito is saying here, because I think it's interesting when you talk about the whole 10x engineer thing. I think Silicon Valley loves to talk about like a 10x engineer. The way I think about it, it's not about 10x engineers specifically, but rather about engineering where you didn't previously have an engineering function. And I think that opportunity is at the SMB level. So like, let's say, we rewind a little bit. Restaurants before could not do delivery, just didn't do delivery, right? Then you get DoorDash, Uber Eats, Postmates, Grubhub, everybody. So now every restaurant can effectively do delivery. That wasn't true before. Other paradigm shifts for restaurants were things like social media, right? Like the whole like TikTok food influencer thing is crazy as a trend. That wasn't really like if you were a restaurant, you didn't need to be on the lookout for a TikTok influencer to come and do a food review of your place. That wasn't like a thing. Google Maps was really like the first thing to do it. And then you see like TikTok doing it, and now it's like a whole different game. Right?
Yelp and yeah.
Right. And so there's like a lot, that's a big shift. What is something engineering could do for a restaurant that they previously couldn't? And I would say supply chain management, right? Like restaurants have to order product in order to make it. Restaurants have to, they don't have to, but they could optimize their workflows in certain ways. They could do shift scheduling, right? So like how is shift scheduling done at a lot of restaurants? You text the manager and be like, I can't make it in today. Find somebody else to cover for me. Right, and like we can get into like all the lost hours that people are completely unpaid and trying to figure out someone to cover for them, right? But a restaurant's not gonna buy a shift scheduler automation tool, right? I'm not gonna spend $50 a month on that. I'm a restaurant. My margins are already like fairly small. And I definitely can't afford to hire a developer in-house and pay them $150 an hour to build me this custom tool for my restaurant and my shifts and my needs. That's never gonna happen. So instead, I can get an agentic solution, 25 cents a checkpoint to build me a custom shift scheduler that aligns exactly to the needs of my restaurant, the hours that I am open, whoever my customers are. Like all of those things weren't possible before. And I would say it's even on a bigger shift than what Google Maps or TikTok or, Shopify does for these like SMBs. I think I don't need a 10x developer. I just need a developer.
And how far away do you think we are from that? Because I think there are tools out there that are starting to do that, but from a restaurant owner adopting that and taking that mindset.
So I think that the restaurant owner is probably not the user of something like Windsurf or these like coding tools. Yeah. But I think what you could find is like a college intern. I think you could very easily pay like an intern like $25 an hour and be like, here's a tool that makes it super easy.
Go use it.
Yeah, and a young person essentially are now native to AI. You grew up on AI the same way you grew up on TikTok, right? Like there's that, people always joke about like, oh, if I'm going to hire a marketer, just hire a Gen Z marketing person, as if there isn't like, years of experience behind marketing as a science.
Yeah.
But like the concept would be something kind of like that, right? Like a restaurant owner would be like, oh yeah, I got a 17-year-old nephew, like he needs a job this summer. Why don't you have him optimize your supply chain for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then taking that to the next step though, because I like the restaurant example, how are you seeing that in government?
Yeah, so governments typically believe that their needs are extremely unique. And to some degree, they're not wrong. A lot of cities have historical context for how they ended up in this specific time and place with this specific context of software requirement. And what you find oftentimes is that the thing that they need to buy can't necessarily be produced by a Google type software or any like big box SaaS offering, because they're going to be like, yes, I want a customer relationship management platform, a CRM, but I need it to integrate with this ERP that's on-prem. And all the modern CRMs are like, we're not going to do that. That's crazy. I'm not going to integrate with an on-prem like ERP. What year is it? But that's what they need. That's a very, very legitimate need that governments have. And I think what you find is that with really smart like AI applications, you can do that at a price point much, much lower than what it used to cost. Because if you wanted me to integrate with your legacy app, but I'm going to give you all these modern features, we were talking about a lot of dev hours.
Right.
That's hours that the city was like, oh, I can't afford somebody with a resume of Google, Facebook, paying them $250 an hour to like get the system working. You don't have to anymore. You can do it much, much cheaper at a much greater scale. And that's what Fish Technologies does is we bring that civic impact.
No, I'll jump in. Like I think that like the idea that AI is allowing people to really address the long tail of use cases in ways that they haven't really been able to at a cost of revenue that's much more accessible, right? Being able to personalize and customize your outreach, your solutions, your messaging, everything about your offering. You can not only create it at a lower cost, you can message it and talk about it at a lower cost and more personalized one-to-one way. I think it's that ability to address the long tail. I think that really makes AI a very unique inflection point in a way a lot of companies can service the market.
I'm really glad you said long tail, because I do believe this is where the civic impact is, and a lot of where the economic disparity and social inequality is here. Because let's say you're a government that manages, a population size of 5,000 people. Those 5,000 constituents actually have the same exact needs as the city of Philadelphia constituents, right? I still need my trash picked up. I still need to call 911, send my kids to school, hopefully go to a library, do all of these things. I need the exact same things, but you are working with a budget 5% the size of the city of Philadelphia, right? But I still need all the same services, and somehow I'm supposed to buy the software to enable all of that for 5% of that price. That's not how the business model works for a traditional software company. I don't sell it to you at 5% of what I would sell it to anybody else, right? That's not how it works. I think unlocking that long tail is really that's how AI applications can be driving social equality. Those are, I think, the opportunities that I'm really, really looking forward to through AI.
So it really does sound like, because when I first asked the question, I wasn't sure how governments were going to start using AI, but it sounds like they're primed to use AI.
So, I think the phrasing is interesting, because they don't use AI directly, right? They're not the users, they're not the end users, but they are the beneficiaries.
Right, that's a good point. Yeah. No, it's a good point. I think and to get to the question I was going to ask you, because goes back to what I was saying, right? There are these AI features, or you missed that back, right? It's are you using AI? And then it's well, what does that mean? How? Am I building a new feature? Am I making my team more efficient? Am I just a team that's not going to touch it, but going to hire a team that's going to use AI, so we're going to build more efficiently, like you're saying? So there's so many different levels to get into when you say are you using AI or are you adopting AI? So to get your thoughts, Lana. So before we jump into how PamPam is using it, how are you thinking about AI as a founder and navigating AI in the early stage startup scene?
Yeah, I think big plus one to everything that was said, we're a team of two. And so, we use kind of AI every day in terms of coding. Today, we had to refactor a ton of stuff, and we used Cursor for pretty much all of it. And that was super, super helpful. It was still a lot of manual work, but it sped things up by a lot. And so that's an everyday example. And then for me as a first time founder, I just use it to learn so much. And I think there's so much opportunity there. And then in terms of PamPam and what we do with our maps, from the beginning, PamPam was about maps are so technical and overwhelming. How can we make that more accessible? And so, letting people use AI to help create the maps seemed really, really obvious when those capabilities became available to us. And so that's something that we did kind of right away, and then have been building on top of that. So that's been, it felt like a natural integration to just we're trying to make this thing really easy. I think there's a lot of opportunity for AI to make the user experience better, especially for people who are making things. And I think you see that a lot in all of the coding applications. That's a big part of what's happening. So that's really exciting. And then I think to the point that both Lilly and Tito made earlier, a lot of our customers that we see are people who weren't really building apps before, but because of AI, they're oh yeah, now I'm ready to start my web-based business or my app. And, and then the maps become a part of that. But it's really interesting to see that audience space where it's we can't really assume that they're technical the way that people used to be technical. It's a very different, they're very savvy. They're really understanding what's happening now. but it's not like they're like really coding, and that sort of thing. So that's really cool to see. I think there's going to be like a big emergence of like entrepreneurs and these like new age kind of like app and web builders. So that's really exciting, and those are certainly a lot of our user base.
And what was the response to? Because to your point, like the maker space, no pun intended, like maker space.
Yeah.
What was their response to your end user response when you introduced those tools? So I feel like, to your point, these are experience. You can just do more, faster, better, more easily. So what was that response?
So we have like a few different AI features, but for us, the thing that has been most impactful is actually like kind of the thing that everybody has, which is like, we actually don't have it right now, but we used to have just like a prompt to map thing on our landing page. And so it's like, it's kind of a meme right now, like every landing page looks the same. It's like that big prompt box. And that was like really effective. Again, I think because maps feel very inaccessible, very, very technical. And so, and from there, like you'd enter your prompt and then you'd go straight into a map editor. So it wasn't like, it was just like a static map and you couldn't edit it. It was like, actually, you could edit it. You could upload your own data via CSV. You can embed it like, there's like a whole bunch of non-AI stuff. But as like a 3-second, now I've made a map, like that was like very compelling. And allowed us to like reach a lot of people who we wouldn't have reached otherwise.
Yeah. No, I love that example because we were talking before. It's like users that maybe would drop off way beforehand that would never get a chance to experience it are now seeing that so much faster because of AI doing it for you. Now you have them locked in. They're like, oh, this is a map. I can do all these things. So I think that is, from a user experience standpoint, like very, very exciting.
Yeah.
So I know we were talking about kind of scaling more efficiently. Tito mentioned a company of 12, but kind of operating a lot more. I'm curious around just growth and how you're seeing that in the startup scene. I think Tito in our prep call you said seed strapping or something like that. So I don't even know what that means still. But but when we think about growing a company today, fundraising, bootstrapping, you name it, because of where we are today, what are your thoughts on just how you're steering your company and maybe some advice on kind of what you learned kind of through that so far?
Well, for us, we're bootstrapped for now. And so, so it's me, my co-founder, we're both, he's really the engineer, but we're both like technical, we're both product designers. So we just like do all the things. It's definitely interesting. And like I said, I think we're learning so much, well, because you have to, but then like AI definitely helps that. I like forget the question now.
Just around like when you're thinking about like scaling your company and growth, and you think about, it could be AI, but even not, right? Just like bootstrapping, fundraising, just what direction you feel like your company's going and maybe something that you learn along the way from doing that.
Yeah, for sure. We're really open to like different outcomes. And for us, being bootstrapped for now gives us like what we see is like a larger possibility of success. There's a world where, we don't grow that big, but it's actually still like successful for us. Right. And there's a world where, we do manage to scale it up and then we do go raise and that's great as well. And so right now we're kind of like open to the different options. But we feel especially open to kind of like, growing at a speed that feels comfortable for us. And kind of having like, different outcomes that could still be successful for us and for Pam Pam. So yeah, it's definitely been interesting and like, it's given us, I think, like more time to kind of pivot. We started as a consumer tool. We're going like more B2B now. So yeah, we're kind of in that world, but we're open, but we're not like raising or anything like that right now.
And Tito, when you think about that seed strapping idea, but what are some themes that you're seeing around companies when they come like to growth and just scaling?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I was saying before, is that like, if you want to, lots of different factors, but if you want to look at just AI's impact on this trend, the idea behind the seed strapping, we're seeing a lot of founders raise that first 1 or 2 institutional rounds of funding and then achieve profitability in ways that maybe typically need more funding in the past to grow to that level of profitability. And so they're like, I've raised this round and I'm good. And I can keep on growing here in a sustainable way, like more sustainably. And it's really AI's role in that is obviously numerous, but it could be around that same reducing the cost of growth. Well, you can have, typically two types of companies where you have your product-led growth, right? Or your sales-led growth, where like you have large teams of salespeople going out there and beating doors down and getting those demo calls, especially when you're enterprise focused. Or you could just have the best product. Like Cursor just grew incredibly because they had a really incredible product. Where AI allows you to bridge that gap is that you can be really sales oriented without necessarily having giant teams of sales people going out there and they closing these sales for you. And you can have a smaller sales outfit, fill your top of your funnel, go through and qualify and book those meetings as a founder or a small team and close those deals in ways that maybe you weren't able to before the advent of some of these modern conversational AI solutions. And so I think this trend is what you're going to see more and more is that even as from a funding perspective, even as these rounds get more and more competitive and people are piling into these, some of the numbers you hear around OpenAI or their funding rounds or Anthropic or XAI or whatever, all these like incredible, insane numbers, to be honest, you'll see in a lot of other companies who are able to hit levels of growth that they are satisfied with without needing to give up as much equity as they had to in the past because they've been able to leverage some of the efficiencies that come with deploying AI internally and really optimizing their resources, both financial and human resources.
If you are scaling a business, building a team, or just looking to surround yourself with people who get it, you should know about Fiddler Club. It's where Philly's founders, investors, creatives, and leaders come together in a space as ambitious as they are. With workspace, wellness, dining, and curated events all under one roof, Fiddler Club is your invitation to connect, grow, and belong. Step into your ultimate third space, where connections spark and ideas thrive. Visit fiddlerclub.com to learn more.
And so Lilly, when you think about kind of growth and scaling your company, and bootstrapping, fundraising, venture scene, how are you kind of approaching things?
I would say, so the fundamentals of venture have not changed, but I think the fundamentals of venture is one of the most misunderstood concepts, including by venture capitalists. Mm-hmm. So I would say, like, foundationally, the role of venture is to help you answer high risk, high value hypotheses, questions, where if you are right, the value of your company just 10x's. And if you're wrong, then that capital is gone, essentially. And your goal as a startup founder who's venture backed is to essentially pick like 3 of those things, and that is your seed A, B, right? Like that's how the fundraising path works. If I'm right about this, then my company's now worth this much money because I proved this out conceptually. Okay, now I'm gonna need a lot more money to prove out this next thing. And if I'm right about that, then my company's going to be worth this much more, and we go up in size. And that's really like supposed to be the goal of venture. That's the only way that you can take on the amount of risk that a venture capital firm would expect to take on in order to get that IPO or whatever that liquidity event, right, benefit is. So I don't think anything about that fundamentally has changed about AI. But to Tito's point, your cost model has changed dramatically. So when you look at that hypothesis from a founder perspective, I think you're thinking, well, what does it cost me to test that hypothesis now? Because what was the most expensive thing prior to AI? Engineering. Oh my God, the engineers are so expensive. Oh, they got to eat. They're so expensive, Yeah. They're so expensive. So if I want to test if this hypothesis works, if I want to test that this feature is really going to be that killer difference, I need to invest $1 million or $2 million into hiring those engineers and getting them through 6 or 9 months of my product roadmap to see if that worked. That's just not true anymore if I can pay $5 to an AI agent, right? So I think really like what the difference is that like those questions don't change. The hardest part has always been finding the high value questions that are worth answering. Like finding the question that is worth answering is the eternal like venture-backed startups struggle. I think one thing you can say is a little different is if the cost model is different, there are certain questions that used to be kind of unavailable to you that are now available. So if headcount is not the thing that is most expensive, what is the next most expensive thing? And I would argue time. Time is really, really costly. And there were certain industries that were inaccessible due to the amount of time it would take to get to a conclusion. And government is one of them.
What you just said was really interesting. So there were certain industries or spaces that people necessarily couldn't access because time was such a unrealistic thing to achieve. Well, because of time, you couldn't achieve that. When you say that, what does that really mean? Things can happen faster, so you can see them sooner? Or like you're saying like building rocket ships?
So your sales cycle.
Okay.
That's the easiest one. We could talk hardware, but realistically, I'm not a hardware expert, and I don't want to get into that.
No, sales is perfect. Let's talk sales.
Okay, so let's talk sales. B2B enterprise sales. How long does it take? A long time. A long time. B2G, B2 government. Longer. Whatever you think B2B is, it's longer.
Double it.
It's double. Yeah, right? So like time, one of the problems is like, all right, well, if I need $1 million or $2 million for the engineers, I need to feed them for a year or two in order to see if the government is actually going to buy my solution. That's a very expensive equation. But if I can drop one of those numbers to be like, okay, well now it costs me $5 because I'm actually just feeding a computer, not a person, I can now afford to wait a year or two and see if that sales cycle plays out.
Yeah.
And am I right? Is that worth doing? So do we see more smaller companies that can grow faster? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would also say we were going to see a lot of smaller companies that can sustain longer.
Yeah, and it's that time to market, like so the sales cycle being able to survive longer. I forget there's a term for like valley of death or whatever that term is, where a lot of startups just go out of business waiting for the enterprise sales cycle to just complete. It happens all the time, and so that's a great point. I think that speed to market, speed to insight, and speed to turn that insight into a product is also critical. If AI is helping you ship product faster, it's helping you code faster, it's helping you get messaging out, your marketing out faster and more personalized. If AI is helping you do all these different things, it helps you take an idea, an hypothesis, and turn that into a product faster.
Yep.
You're able to test more hypotheses.
Yeah.
You're able to adapt quickly to changes in the market much faster, more effectively. You're able to service needs and be first, if you can be first. It's that ability to increase speed and pace and time to market. Being first a lot of times is better than being best.
Yeah.
So if you can increase that pace of product development, that's why coding is a lot of dollars are going there, because people realize if I can ship product faster, I can just keep shipping product until I get it right.
I think it's like not just that too. It's not just about speed, it's about quality.
Yeah.
So like you used to work at Figma, right? You said that. So at Figma, like one of the big things was like Figma prototypes changed the game, because now all of a sudden, instead of like hypothetically mom testing somebody about like, could you see yourself using this? You could put out a Figma prototype that just doesn't do anything, obviously, but you can click around in it and people get a feeling. Okay, scratch that. Give me a full-blown app tomorrow that somebody can really experience and use. Oh my God, it's not just speed, but the quality of that test, of that data, becomes way higher than a hypothetical Figma, than a hypothetical mom test user interview.
So let's talk about the Philadelphia startup scene. Obviously, it's the Founding Philly podcast about Philly startups. So I want to make sure that we get to everyone's kind of perspectives on this. Each one of you have your own unique role and kind of in your own market. I guess, what has your experience been in the Philadelphia startup scene? You can be candid, it's okay. But maybe what are some things you would also have to see maybe improve from the startup scene, or maybe double down on?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a founder in the Philadelphia startup. I've worked on some startups, Philly area startups, so had great experiences with companies here. What I think is going to be key to Philadelphia taking that next step as an ecosystem for startups and being attractive to founders is, I think, starting is maybe finding some kind of specialization. as an ecosystem. What I mean by that is like, you look at something like Boston, and Boston became a place known for biotech and like kind of healthcare related startups, and that just became Boston's thing, right? Are there other startups doing different things there? But like, if you want to build a biotech startup, you're gonna go to Boston for the most part. Or I think robotics too, they do. Or Pittsburgh is mobility, and so we have world-class universities here. So you have talented people here. Drexel, you have Temple, you have UPenn, you have all these places. You have talent people here. It's about when those people are thinking about what they're going to do with their next step in their career, and some of them are more entrepreneurial minded. It's finding a way to make sure that if they're thinking of doing something that this city can become known for, they're gonna figure it out and stay here, or they're gonna come here to found that specific type of company, whatever it is. Right. And I don't know what that is, and that's something as an ecosystem we have to do some exploring to figure out what it is that we can specialize in to kind of be as a Kickstarter and accelerant to building our ecosystem.
That's a good point.
I want to give Philadelphia a shout out, a very warm shout out. I think that I said a little bit about like the foundations of venture. I think every venture capitalist, and I'm so sorry to bucket everybody like this. I feel like I say this from like an entrepreneur's perspective, and I'm like, so I think venture capitalists believe that they are independent thinkers, and they believe that they are wolves, right? They're like, I make the choices. In SF, every investor is a sheep.
The follower.
Oh, they are a sheep. And some of them even say, like, I love to follow. Just tell me who else has already done this deal and I'm in. And I think this is overall a negative thing because it really limits the like foundational, did I do my research? Did I do my due diligence? Do I actually believe in what this person is saying? And they reduce it down to, well, you know what? If Zach said it's good, I'm in. Here's my money. Yeah. Right? So like in SF, fundraising is so momentum based. Yeah. It's not foundation based. I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think it's healthy, and I think you see market corrections that address that periodically. We go, oh, let's slash all the prices now because it's been too sheepy lately. And I think Philadelphia, for what it's worth, is filled with wolves. I think Philadelphian investors think for themselves, mostly. They're because the ecosystem is actually kind of fragmented, you see a lot less following. People are more willing to just be like, okay, well, let me look at this. Like, I want to meet with you. I want to learn who you are. Tell me about your company. Like, I'm going to think about it from a first perspective, and I don't need you to go and round up 8 or, whatever other angels to convince me of this deal. And I think that is something you see that is unique to Philadelphia. Angel investors who are truly thinking for themselves, not looking to jump on a bandwagon, but actually do it because they believe in it.
It's an interesting perspective because I think I've done a lot of these episodes and it kind of always ends up where like, I love Philly, it's a great place to work. It's just always hard to find funding. And they kind of spin it in a somewhat negative when they compare it to like San Fran or New York.
No.
I never
I'm a
heard
big
it.
optimist.
I've never heard it spun that way. But when you say it that way, I mean, it's
so
true.
you can tell I praise venture capital.
it makes sense.
You want to buy right now.
It makes sense. Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to look at it. I mean,
for me, I guess, I moved to Philly like 3 years ago, kind of started building out Pam Pam maybe a year and a half after that. So I have found Philly to be like super, super welcoming. It's interesting because it is so diverse in all of the industries and the things that people are building. So that's really cool. Coming from SF, it's very, very like specific and very, very, very much software. Whereas here it's like beyond software, which is cool to see. Although like building very much like software and somewhat consumer software, it would be nice if there were like more consumer software stuff and people who are just like building, like a little bit more scrappier, which I think you also see in SF, although that kind of changes, it might change rapidly too. But but overall I think it's cool to see like the diversity of the things that people are building and have found it like really welcoming. And, being in Philly has allowed us to build what we're building in terms of like having it be bootstrapped, having it be so small, like, moving at a pace that we find sustainable. I don't think that would have been possible for me and my co-founder realistically somewhere else.
Yeah, no, I think that it makes sense. I mean, it goes back to what you were saying before. Like, it's just like a good place to kind of build and like where you are. But at the same time, it is diverse. So to Tito's point, like it isn't, I mean, obviously Philly's known as being like kind of life science. It's just like, there's so much of it. But at the same time, outside of that, in terms of the tech world, it is pretty diverse. But so I think we're pretty close to end. But kind of as we wrap up, just looking ahead, I'm curious to get everyone's thoughts, like looking ahead, maybe for you, the startup scene per se. What's next? What are you looking forward to as you kind of think ahead of your journey? And again, it could be your journey, it could be the startup scene, but what are you looking ahead to for the rest of the year?
I think a lot about how we are products of the communities that raise us. And I think that there is often this question of like, oh, okay, you got educated here in Philly, and then when you want to make something big, you move to New York to do it, or you move to SF to do it. And I get why people say that. 'Cause to your point, people go, oh, well, that's where the money is. I have to follow where the money is if I want to build this thing. And I so strongly disagree with that because if anything, the money follows the talent. Like there have been cities where like, oh, as long as there's like 1 or 3 keystone companies, people come to give more money here. So like that is a very real thing. So the thing that's on my mind, and I think hopefully when this comes out, if anybody's thinking like, where should I build my company? Where should I try to fundraise? I hope you choose to do it here. I hope you choose to do it here. And to believe in yourself enough to know that like, hey, if you have a really good idea, you have the traction, you're the quality founder, someone will back you. There is a wolf here that will give you money and help you stay here and help you grow here. And if you were educated here, you were born here, you're raised here, honestly, I think you owe it to your community to give back to that.
Maybe that could be that that billboard we were talking about, or before we get started.
And also, JC Chelsea's here.
JC, there's a wolf here for you.
Oh yeah.
Wolf for everybody. Yeah. I think it's an exciting time just to be in the startup ecosystem. Obviously not from the founder perspective, but for the founders, this is such a transformative time where it feels like there's a lot, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of innovation is not evenly distributed, right? Some people are grasping onto the innovation of the current times quicker than others. And then usually it's not the biggest companies. It's actually, you look at how tough Google has had it trying to get going here in AI and getting some consumer traction. That innovation is whoever is there for whoever can grasp it. So being in this time, I think, is really a great opportunity to, I think people are closing the gap in ways that probably didn't exist before, and that's exciting. And just from our perspective as a group within Comcast who's trying to make sure that we are close to where that innovation is happening, we're just really excited at the idea that we can help with aligning Comcast strategic goals with some of the really most interesting tech in AI and beyond that's coming out today. So we always recommend any founders, Philadelphia and otherwise, who are interested in seeing whether their community or their solution or their product aligns with our goals to feel free to check out what we do. We're at lift.comcast.com. Little plug there at the end.
Good plug.
Yeah. See, I brought it all together.
For me, in terms of like Philly and Philly tech scene, I'm really excited about, I think, kind of like this group that I mentioned earlier, which is like kind of like tech adjacent or like nearing tech. I think there's so many cool entrepreneurs, communities, artists and creatives in Philly who are doing like so much for the community, have super innovative and interesting business models that like, you wouldn't, they're not necessarily like tech companies, but, very much like tech enabled. And so I'm really excited for that group of people as well. And seeing, how AI will kind of like change their trajectory and, create more initiatives in the city that are like a bit more grassroots as well. So that's something I'm excited about.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining the Roundtable series. I really enjoyed getting a chance to learn more about your experiences and just more about what you think about the startup scene and obviously everything that's going on in the industry and market today. So thank you again.
Thank
Zach.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zach.
Thanks for having us.